Hi, everyone. Welcome to Analyzing Shopping Behavior, Insights from Google Analytics Enhanced Ecommerce, sponsored by Avatria. I'm going to be your host today. My name is John McDonough, and I'm the lead product manager for Avatria Convert. I'll introduce what Convert is in just a moment here, but we're a SaaS product that uses enhanced e-commerce data pretty extensively. So I've spent a lot of time working with it, and I've learned a lot of things about how to use it effectively. And I'm really excited to share some of those lessons with you today. So a little bit more about me. I did develop the enhanced e-commerce tag audit process for new customers. If you attended our last webinar or viewed the video of it, you saw me provide advice about how you can make sure that you are collecting data properly on your e-commerce site. I've also advised dozens of clients on the proper implementation of enhanced e-commerce tagging. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to ping me during or after the webinar, and I'm happy to help out in whatever way I can. Avatria, the company that I work for, obviously, is a full-service e-commerce consulting agency. We were founded in 2014 by a team of industry veterans. So our founders and a lot of our staff came from some of the bigger e-commerce consulting agencies, such as Accenture, Sapient Razorfish, Acuity Group, and others. And then when it comes to e-commerce, we basically do it all. The services that we provide include platform implementation, search enhancement, tracking and analytics, data science, and performance testing. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. If it's related to e-commerce, chances are that we do it and are experts in it. We have a wide array of clientele, including both enterprise B2C and B2B businesses, such as Discount Tire and Annixter, the latter of whom is a Fortune 500 wire and cable distributor. We don't just work with enterprise businesses, for the record. We also have a number of smaller clients as well. And then in addition to our services work, we developed and launched Avatria Convert, which, as I mentioned before, is a SaaS product that uses behavioral data and machine learning to optimize conversion on e-commerce sites. So I can talk a little bit more about Convert at the end of the call if anyone's interested, but in a nutshell, we're a findability optimization suite. We do sort order optimization, product recommendations, and then insights. Here's a quick preview of the agenda for today's session. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we think enhanced e-commerce is so valuable. From there, I'll talk a little bit about how you can get started effectively in a session where you're analyzing your shopping data and to kind of set yourself up for success. And then finally, for the bulk of this session, I'll spend going through the major enhanced e-commerce reports in Google Analytics and provide some insights into how you can get the most out of them. So what they're good for and some tips that I recommend to all of our clients to kind of get the insights they need to make a difference for their business. Feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout our conversation. I'll try to be checking in there as we go on, and I'm happy to answer anything that comes up. So, all right, so let's proceed then. So first, why are we talking about Google Analytics Enhanced Ecommerce? As you might be able to tell, we're very big fans of it, so much so that we're on our second webinar on the topic, and we actually built some pretty major components of Avatria Convert around its functionality. And the reason for that is that we think that it is a tool that every e-commerce site should be using. It's free, which is great. It's a tagging and analytics solution, which allows e-commerce sites to track customer shopping behavior across the entire funnel. So that means that you can use it to evaluate the performance of individual products, your different categories, brands, and lists. You can use it to evaluate how different aspects of your conversion funnel are functioning. You can even use it to look at how internal promotions are performing. And from all of that data, the goal is that you can make better decisions, in the realms of merchandising. So, what products are most popular, what products are underperforming, what categories you want to highlight, so on and so forth. Site design. So, making data-driven decisions about how your PDP pages should be set up, what functionality you should offer on list pages, so on and so forth. And then finally, some of the customer experience decisions that you need to make as well. So, are there ways that you can optimize your checkout flow, things of that nature. So I do want to just kind of pause here and say something really quickly, which is that for a lot of the clients we work with, having good data practices and good data analysis practices isn't something they're doing today. And the fact that you're on this webinar suggests that maybe there's room for improvement for you as well. And so what I do want to just kind of highlight really quickly is that even if you don't feel as if you're where you want to be today, the first step that I would always recommend is making sure that your data collection is in place and is as effective as it can be. Good analysis requires a lot of data and a lot of good data. So if you're not collecting data properly from the start, you're going to be undermining everything else you can do. So if you do have any concerns about the data quality that you're collecting, please reach out to me. We perform analytics audits for our clients all of the time. We're more than happy to take a look at your site and see what you're collecting and whether or not there are ways that you can be improving upon that. So if you implement enhanced e-commerce tagging, what do you get? We're going to talk about that for the rest of this session. So these are kind of the core reports that I'm going to focus on for today. So e-commerce overview, shopping behavior, checkout behavior, product performance, and product list performance. So let's just jump in and take a look at each one. And before I do that, actually, I want to talk a little bit about how to make your sessions as effective as you possibly can. So I know that I've had this feeling. I know that a lot of the clients that we work with have had this feeling, but I think it's pretty common when you first jump into Google Analytics, especially if you're not super practiced in using it, to feel overwhelmed by it. There's so much data at your fingertips. There's so many different reports and things you can be looking at. Knowing where to start and knowing what you should be doing can be a challenge. What I've found is that setting clear goals helps a lot. So, before you even get into Google Analytics, sit down and try to generate a set of questions you want to answer. Things like, did the promotion we ran increase sales? Are site sales increasing or decreasing over the last month? So on and so forth. This type of structure and these types of goals are going to give you a sense of purpose and are going to eventually uncover new and different goals that you may want to explore further. So in addition to whatever questions you may have that are going to be unique to your site, I generally recommend a set of specific goals that everyone can to go out there anytime they go in to look at their e-commerce data in Google Analytics. So the first of these is identifying outliers for further investigation. So basically, clicking around and seeing if you notice anything weird. So days that have significantly higher or lower conversion, revenue, etc. Outliers I found are one of the big things that help stimulate further research. So you notice something that's going on a specific day and you say, why is that? And you dive into that data a little bit deeper and you find something else weird, which leads down another rabbit hole and ultimately creates a very productive session where you either discover something about something that users are doing on your site that you didn't know before, or potentially something about the way data is being collected. In addition to that, I would also recommend identifying some of your key drop-off points. So, rather than just focusing on how people enter your site and whether or not you're bringing enough people to the site, we want to focus on how effectively you're managing the people that do enter the funnel. So where are they dropping off? Why are they dropping off? And what can you do to encourage greater engagement on the part of your visitors? This is something that probably everybody's always looking at or trying to figure out, but understanding what your hot products and trends are is super valuable for a number of reasons. It's going to inform your marketing spend potentially. It can help with inventory management. It can even help with website design and merchandising, making conversion better, bringing more people to the site, and making your business more efficient. And then finally, we get a little focused on this because it's so close to what we do with Convert, but we think that looking for and finding optimization opportunities within categories and search results is a really low-hanging fruit here. You often have the ability to make a direct impact into what products people are seeing in your categories or search results. What results are being surfaced, and small changes here, as we found with Convert, can make a significant difference in conversion and in revenue generation. So those are kind of the key goals I would recommend. Of course, pad this out with your own, but if you're lacking in ideas or you don't know where to start here and see where it leads you. And then one small piece of advice that I like to recommend to our clients as well is that when you are setting up your analysis in Google Analytics, one thing I highly recommend is that you choose the date range you're looking at in week-long increments. So 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, etc. What you want to do is make sure that you're keeping equal-sized business units so that you don't end up accidentally throwing off your analysis based on uneven traffic patterns. So, for example, it's really common to just look at my data in terms of months. How did I do in October versus how I did in November? But interestingly, if your site has unequal traffic patterns, say your Saturdays are especially busy compared to other days of the week, that's where the most transactions get processed, that's where the most revenue get generated. An easy example of what I'm talking about is the fact that back in October, there were 5 Saturdays in the month, whereas November only had 4. So if I'm trying to do a month-to-month comparison and I'm looking at October versus November, I might be led to sort of false conclusions just based on the fact that there is that one extra Saturday in one month that doesn't exist in the other. So keeping my week-long increments ensures that I can reduce the skew or reduce natural skew as much as possible. So great. With that, I'm going to jump into Google Analytics actually. So we'll close this presentation and pick up in the browser. So really quickly, a couple things I'll call out. I'm going to be using Google Analytics, their Google merchandising store. If you've been through the Google Analytics Academy, you should have access to this. So you can feel free to follow along. If you haven't gone through the Google Analytics Academy, I'd highly recommend it. It's very useful for learning how to navigate Google's interface and discovering things that are in some of the reports that I'm not going to be touching on during this session. So for our enhanced e-commerce reports, I'm focusing here on the conversions section. So underneath conversions, and then underneath e-commerce is where I'm going to find all of those reports that I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. I will, note very quickly that this marketing section is also related to enhanced e-commerce tagging. We don't do as much with it, so I'm going to save it for a different day. However, if you do have questions about it, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help you understand how you can be using some of the marketing functionalities of enhanced e-commerce as effectively as you can, funnel components. So let's start here with the e-commerce overview report. Based on the name, you could probably guess what this report is best for. What this is going to provide you is a high-level snapshot of your site's overall e-commerce performance over a given time frame. So we start here with this little time series where I can look at how different metrics changed on a day-by-day or week-by-week or even hourly basis if I wanted to. So that's really useful for just seeing how things are trending over the course of my time range. Below there, I'm going to have my core KPIs. So revenue, my site's gross revenue, my overall e-commerce conversion rate, how many transactions I had in the period, and what my average order value is. Below here, I'm going to focus a little bit less on these next two sections. Marketing is some of the marketing components that I already glossed over, so I'm going to continue to do so. And then at the bottom of this report, I have some information about my top sellers if I just want a really quick view about what products or what brands are selling the most. But when it comes to this e-commerce overview report, I would definitely say that the most value and the time that I'm spending most is looking at these top two sections. my time series, and then my scorecard metrics. So what I've found that this report is really helpful for is in helping me identify outliers. And the easiest way to do that, and the fastest way to do that, I found, is to focus in on this time series, dialing in the metrics that I care the most about, and then just seeing how things are moving. So as I kind of glance through this report, there's a couple of things that jump out to me right away. For example, what I'm noticing is that we have a few days throughout this month, the 14th, the 16th, the 18th, and then 2 consecutive days at the end of the month, where no revenue and no conversion is being recorded. So that is something that's very concerning to me as an e-commerce manager. I don't know if that's a data collection issue, if there was a problem with my site on that day, or if there might be some other reason that's leading to that. So that's something I'm going to quickly note and try to look into a little bit further. The other thing that I'm noticing, in terms of outliers here, is that for most of my time frame, conversion rate and revenue, they stay pretty close to one another. There's some gaps rise at some places, but for the most part, they're pretty close. They stick pretty close. However, there is this one day of September 19th where there's a more significant gap between the two metrics than there is, anywhere else in this period. That's something that jumps out to me really quickly. It could be that there's, 1 or 2 big orders on that day that are skewing, the data to a certain degree, or it could be that I did something specific on that day, whether it was a promotion or, a new product or something of that nature that caused that big jump in revenue as compared, that big jump in conversion as compared to revenue. So that's something that I'm going to kind of also note down and try to explore a little bit further. Obviously, you can always change your date range if you want to look for outliers to a longer period. You can also compare periods to look for outliers that way. But then one of the other big things that I'm gonna try to spend time doing on this report is applying user segments so that I can have a better sense of how different demographics and how different user types are impacting conversion on my site. So 2 that I would definitely recommend are going to be new versus returning users. So I'm just going to click into my segment selector here, grab new and returning, and then let this load. And then what we'll see here is that the report is now split out into those 2 segments so that I can analyze them side by side. The time series gets a little bit harder to read once I do this. It can be easy or it can be helpful sometimes to turn off one of your metrics so there's a little bit less noise if that gets confusing for you. But where I really want to focus on is in my scorecard metrics here. So, I can see how much revenue new users are generating versus returning users, and I can see that actually new users are generating the majority of revenue on my site in this time period. They also have a slightly higher conversion rate, although they do have a slightly lower average order value compared to my returning users. So what this tells me is that I'm doing a pretty good job of getting new users into the site, getting them to convert, and that probably there's room for me to improve on that with my returning users. So, this makes me think, what can I do to generate more sessions, given that they convert at the same rate or just about the same rate? How can I bring returning users back to my site more frequently, especially based on the fact they have, higher AOV? That's something that I'm going to try to key in on and see if I can improve upon. So that is the e-commerce overview report. Feel free if you have any questions about where we're at right now to share them. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next report. First, I'm going to quickly turn off my segments. Okay, great. So now we're on to the shopping behavior analysis report. So what this report is really useful for is visualizing my shopping funnel and understanding where my key drop-off points are. So what we have here is that we can see my total number of sessions, the number of sessions I had with product views, the number of sessions with add to carts, then checkouts and transactions. And what this really helpfully illustrates is, of the number of users who get to a certain stage of my funnel, how many are continuing on to the next step. So we can see that about 20% of my users who visited the site ended up visiting a product detail page, while about 79% of them fell off and didn't interact with a product at all. And then we can kind of see that carry on through the rest of the funnel. And so what this report does in a really easy and I think visually appealing way is it helps me identify what my key drop-off points are and how significant they are. So obviously, quick little note here, obviously there's a bit of subjectivity involved here. Is it more significant that 78% of my total sessions didn't view a product at all, or that 95% of the people who started to check out didn't complete their transaction? Both of those are issues in my opinion, and I want to try to address both of those. However, I do have the ability to see that both of these problems exist, and they tell me that these are two areas that I really need to key in on. One thing that's really handy about this report is that if you do want to explore one of these specific drop-off points further, you have this really easy ability to create a segment from those users. So if I click down here on no shopping activity, it gives me this prompt to create a segment. And then I can kind of create a segment that I can apply to some of my other reports to understand, what is going on with these users who are visiting but not viewing products at all. And I can try to figure out, what's going on there. How can I improve engagement? Where are they coming from? What pages are they landing on? So on and so forth. I can do that with any of these segments that I want. I can even do that with these top segments as well. Another thing that this report is really useful for is just to identify major data collection issues. So something that's probably been staring us all in the face as I've been talking is the fact that there are no sessions with an add to cart in this report, which we know can't be the case because there were a bunch of sessions with checkouts, and this isn't a chicken and the egg sort of thing. You need a cart to check something out. So that tells me that something is going on with my data collection practices that I need to fix. Another thing that this report can do to help you identify data collection issues is you can look out for high numbers of sessions that are starting at unusual places. It really shouldn't be possible for a session to start in checkout or to start at the transaction phase. And so if you're noticing that, that's something you're probably going to want to dig into a little bit further, talk to your technical team about to see if you can figure that out. So just for example purposes, I'm going to bump my start date back to July to demonstrate this. And you can see that if there's a second rectangle on top of the primary rectangle, that's showing you how many sessions entered at that stage. So we can see someone somehow entered at the transaction phase. Doesn't really make sense. I'm going to talk to my team about that to see what's going on. So one thing, so where I've gotten now, let's jump forward a couple of weeks. I've identified some of my drop-off points. I've done some deeper research trying to figure out what is going on and how I might be able to address the fact that no one is interacting with products on my site. And I've made some changes to site design and to some of my marketing plans to see if I can improve upon that figure. So what I want to do next then is I want to compare periods to see if the changes that I've made have made a difference. So I'm gonna compare the date range right before this so that we can see what it looks like to compare two periods on this report. And I think this is a really important thing to note, just from a visual perspective, is that some stuff in here is a little bit misleading. So what I want to call out really quickly is the fact that all of these percent change figures that they share on this report are comparing raw totals. So right here we can see 47,000 or about 48,000 sessions is about 14% less than the 55,000 or 56,000 sessions there were beforehand. The same thing is true down here with no shopping activity. This 14% 14% improvement is that there were just, only 38,000 people who dropped off versus 44%. And now, if I'm trying to figure out if I'm actually improving my ability to get people to go to the next stage, I'm not as interested in the raw totals as I am in the percentages. So this is off screen at this point. I did these numbers before this to try to make this easier. But if we rewind a couple of seconds here, before I had compared periods, I had seen that there was a 78.83% drop-off rate for no shopping activity in my current period. If I look at the new period that I'm comparing against, so 44,000 out of about 56,000 drop off, that period's drop-off rate is 78.9%. So we're talking about a 78.83% drop-off versus 78.9% drop-off, which, I'm not, incredible at mental math, but I can tell you very quickly that that is not a 14% improvement. So that's a really significant thing to note. And if you're trying to make comparisons about how much you've improved over a given time frame, I would recommend that you do that math yourself so that you get a clearer picture of what's really going on. I'm not going to demonstrate this now, but another thing that I would recommend oftentimes that you can also apply segments to this report. So you could see how different demographics are interacting with the site, how people who arrive from different places are interacting with the site, so on and so forth. That data is super valuable to you. And yeah, I would definitely recommend that. Okay, moving on to the checkout behavior analysis report. This one should look fairly familiar. So yeah, this is the same basic thing as the shopping behavior report, but we're focused specifically on the checkout funnel at this point rather than my whole site. So we can see I've got a multi-stage checkout here. Here are my 4 steps: billing and shipping, payment, review, and then how many people transact. The goal here is to see where people are dropping off in checkout, which oftentimes may reveal technical issues or potentially experience issues as well. Something that I should call out that I think is important to note is that this whole report is made possible by the step parameter in the checkout tag. So there are multiple ways that you can configure checkout tags in Google Analytics. There's a basic one which does not include the step parameter, and there's a more advanced one which does. So if you come to this report and you're not seeing this, it means that you're not collecting data as fully as you could be, and there's an improvement that you'll want to talk to your technical team about. Another small note, this is less important, but if you come here and you see this, say step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, that's just a labeling issue. You can actually set your own labels for your checkout flow in the e-commerce settings for your view under the admin panel. So when I'm using this report, one thing that I'm definitely doing is applying segments and looking at how different users are performing here. An easy way to do this that I found is to actually just use this report at the bottom. So I'm going to go into my device category, and what you'll see is that this splits up really quickly for me, allows me to look at my different device categories side by side. So it takes our different steps and it shows me my abandonment rate. So what I can see is that, of my desktop users, about 70% of them are abandoning after billing and shipping. Same thing with tablet users, whereas for mobile users, only about 50% are. That's a pretty significant difference. And it makes me wonder if there's something that I'm doing on my mobile experience that's helping people get further along that I'm not doing on desktop. That could be something like an express checkout option, your Apple Pays or your Google Pays of the world. There could be something else that's working really well. So this is something I definitely want to hone in on. Another thing that I would definitely recommend that you could take a look at here is how different browsers are performing. So, here are my browsers at the high level. Another thing that I can do that might be really helpful is if I want to hone in specifically on mobile, apply my mobile segment here so that I'm only looking at mobile, and then I can take a look at my browsers for my mobile users. And here's a really useful insight for me, which is that I've got about a 70% abandonment rate on Chrome, but only a 40% on Safari, which suggests to me, is there something going on with my mobile Chrome browser that's not working as well as it does on Safari? That's something I'm going to investigate further and potentially have my technical team try to fix. Okay. And then, same thing as always, I'm also looking at, what's going on in my funnel up here. Are there a lot of people who are entering at weird places? It's not quite as concerning that people are entering at payment or review, because a lot of checkout experiences save information. However, it's something to note. One thing I am noticing that's really interesting for me is that for my mobile users, there are 42 sessions with transactions, even though there's only 11 sessions that got to the review stage. What that suggests to me is that either one, there's a data collection issue, or two, which seems a little bit more likely in this case, is that there's a wide adoption of my express payment options on mobile, which is a really useful insight for me to know, because it means that people are converting, potentially more effectively via those routes than they are others. So are there ways that I can push those? Can I offer more express payment methods? All of these are sort of ideas that are generated from, from this basic insight. All right, so I'm going to reset this, and I'm going to jump on to our next report here, which is called Product Performance. So, as you can guess, this report is focused on how well the products on my site are selling. This is easily the best place to look to try to figure out what your hot products are and to try to find product-based trends. I'll call out a couple of things here. So there's actually two reports on this page. The first one is what they're calling the summary, and this is focused on more of my conversion-based metrics. So how much revenue is being generated, how many purchases, how many refunds have been granted, so on and so forth. However, there's also a very useful report that I think can go overlooked, which is called the shopping behavior report. And this is focused more on engagement for specific products. So how many times was a product viewed in a list? How many times did its product detail view page get viewed? How many times did it get added to cart, removed, checked out, purchased, et cetera, et cetera. I find this, again, this is related a little bit to my experience with Convert, which focuses a lot on these type of metrics and understanding how engagement relates to conversion and how to, optimize engagement for optimal conversion. However, understanding how exposure is related to sales performance is crucial. So a thing that I'm doing in product performance a lot is I'm coming in here and trying to find, my overperforming and underperforming products. So, what products in here have a high number of purchases despite relatively low product list views or relatively low product detail views. For me, that's an indication that that product could sell more if it had a higher opportunity to sell. If more users were encountering it, if it was viewed higher up in my product lists, if it had more featuring in recommendation carousels and advertisements and things of that nature. Similarly, to the flip side, I'm also looking for my inefficient products. So what has gotten a lot of exposure that hasn't translated into sales? So looking at some of my, my top viewed or my top detail viewed products, what has especially low sales? These are products that I'm going to consider deprioritizing in some of my merchandising efforts, and seeing if replacing them with more efficient products will lead to better conversion, and more revenue. An easy way to kind of do this analysis that I'll call out here is looking at, your cart to detail rate and your buy to detail rate here. I can go through here and look for, how do, products with relatively similar detail view counts, how are they converting differently? Now that's an insight that I can do a lot with. As always, I'm looking for outliers as I'm glancing through here. I'm definitely noticing that no add to carts are being tracked. That's something that, I want to address here. So how do I go even further this report? One thing I would definitely recommend is messing around and changing your primary dimension down here at the bottom. So I don't have to focus just on products. I can actually look at how the different product categories are performing on my site. So, what are my most popular categories that people are interacting with? What categories are products being sold from most commonly? And then I can do the same thing here with, my brands, trying to figure out what my top brands are, what's selling the most, so on and so forth. This helps me identify some of those higher level trends. It's been, it's moving into winter. My jackets and coats are starting to sell more than my flip-flops. Another thing that's really useful to do here, I'm not going to demonstrate it because we've seen this functionality already, but doing periods comparisons. So applying, compare period and seeing how some of these metrics change can provide extremely useful insights to me. I'm actually going to skip the sales performance report for just a minute here to talk about the product list performance report. One thing you'll notice is that it's very similar looking to the product performance report, which is why I want to talk about it now, while it's fresh in your mind. The difference between these two reports is that product list performance is really keyed in on, not just the products are performing, but where those products are performing from. So this focuses on product lists, which is kind of a fancy way to talk about categories, search results, and product carousels. So there's a couple of things that I can do with this report that are very useful. The first is to understand which product categories and which search queries are being used the most across my site. So I want to look here at my product list names and kind of correlate this with product list views, which is generally a pretty good measure of how commonly people are interacting with them. One thing that I'm going to call out now while I'm trying to do this analysis is that Google is leaving a lot of insights on the table with the way they have tagged their site here. So what you will see really quickly is that they are combining all of their search results pages into one product list called search results. So what this does is it obscures the different search queries and how those different search queries perform. So, honestly, category might be an easier example of this. I have my men's pants categories, and I have my men's shirts categories, and I have my women's pants categories, and so on and so forth. Again, they're combining all of these into a single product list, which is combining the relative performance of products in those places into one big thing. What we generally recommend for best practices is that you include both the product list type as well as the product list name in this parameter when you're tagging your website. So for example, I would recommend that you tag, category dash men's pants and search results dash, blue Nike boots, whatever it may be. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a much longer list of product list names in this report, but my data is just that much more granular now. What I can now do is see how the men's pants category is performing compared to the men's shirts category, compared to the women's pants category, compared to the women's shirts category, which is something that's just not possible with the way that Google has this tagged. So can't stress that enough, super duper valuable, and you'll get a lot of value of that small change here. But once I have it tagged that way, what I can then do is figure out what my top categories are and start to figure out, why they're my top categories, or try to figure out which of my categories are overperforming and underperforming. So again, if I see one category with a ton of impressions, but a relatively low click-through rate or a relatively low number of purchases, that tells me that something about the merchandising in that product list is off. There might be ways that I could optimize the sort order of products in that list. There may be ways, it could be that I'm sending too many, there's something about my site design is, forcing too many people into that list when it's irrelevant to them, so on and so forth. So, that's a big insight that I'm going to be looking at for here. I can also, kind of see things trending in the same way. If I apply a period comparison, are some product lists a lot more popular than they were last month, so on and so forth. So once I figure out what my top lists are, the next thing that I'm going to do is to click into the list and figure out what products are performing most effectively within that list. So clicking into the list allows me to see what products are soaking up some of the different metrics here. And again, just like I did with product performance, what I want to do here is look for my under and overperforming products. So what's getting a lot of impressions and not a lot of clicks, or what's selling a lot despite a low number of impressions. Those are the products that I can prioritize and deprioritize in my merchandising to get better conversion. So again, quick plug for Avatria Convert, the SaaS tool that I work on. This is exactly what we do. This is where our product started. We use machine learning to figure out what those over and underperforming products are, and we automatically optimize sort orders to take advantage of that. So we found that you can get generally, about a 10% increase in conversion and revenue just by tweaking the sort order of products in your categories and in your search results. So you can do this analysis manually, and that's going to be helpful for you to influence your marketing spend, and you can do this work yourself, or you can come and talk to us about Convert, and you can have this done automatically. So if you are doing this work manually, obviously I would definitely recommend that. You have a lot of different categories, you have a lot of search queries. Focus on your most used ones to get the most value out of this. And then, finally, one last thing I can do that can be helpful, I found, is to apply secondary dimensions to this report, which will help me understand a little bit more about how potentially things are working. So, position is a prime example of this. If I apply position as a secondary dimension, and I notice that, click-through rate is, relatively low for position, the first couple of positions versus lower on in the list, to me, that indicates that my sort orders are wrong and that I'm pushing irrelevant products to the top of the list and that there's room for improvement there. All right, so we are running towards the end of this. I'm going to jump into my last report here, which is the sales performance report. And what I would say is that in terms of insight value, I would say that this report has a little bit lesser value than the ones we've talked about thus far. What this report is really useful for is for auditing my data collection. So what you can see here is that we have my transaction IDs along with the revenue, tax, shipping that's associated with it. What this allows me to do is directly compare what I'm recording in Google Analytics to my system of record. Are the right products being recorded? Are the revenue numbers right? Is the tax numbers right? So on and so forth. If I find outliers in my data, this is a place where I'm coming to try to figure out what's going on. An easy way to do that is I can change my primary dimension here and look at this on a date-by-date basis, which makes it a lot easier to hunt down some of those problems. So if I see, one day with especially high revenue or whatever it may be, I can click into that day and then look at my transactions for that day and say, okay, you know what? There was these one or two really, really high value transactions we had that make it look like something is off and it's not. or I can go in and I can discover, oh, you know what? Some sort of technical issue caused a little bit of an error in the way that this transaction was recorded, which is throwing off my data slightly. So that's obviously really useful for you for troubleshooting and error analysis. And then finally, the last thing you can do with this report that I think can be valuable, I will warn you, it does require a bit of manual effort, but if you want to understand what products are purchased together, this is a place you can start. Here are your transaction IDs. You can click into these, see what products are being purchased, start looking for trends. When somebody buys this, they often buy X, so on and so forth. I will use this opportunity to plug Convert one last time. If you're doing that manual effort, it suggests to me that you don't have a tool that's doing it for you. So, a recommendation tool is really effective at showing customers what other users are buying together, which often leads to additional purchases and marginal revenue increases. We have a new product called Convert Recommends. It uses the same data and machine learning technology that we're using for sort order optimization to provide product recommendations. So that could be customers also bought. You may also like similar items, most popular items, you name it. You can really easily display these across your site and improve sales. So again, you don't have to do this work yourself. If you want somebody to help you do it more effectively, talk to me after this session. And so that's it. That's a set of reports that we have to talk about today. Our next session is going to be our last one on enhanced e-commerce, but we are going to be doing one more webinar, which is a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the metrics that we glossed over a little bit today. So we'll go a little bit deeper into some of the key metrics that I kind of referred to: click-through rate, cart to detail rate, buy to detail rate. What are the relative value of these different metrics? How can I use them most effectively? How do I gauge the relative value of one versus another, so on and so forth. In addition to that, I will also want to talk a little bit about custom metrics that aren't provided to you out of the box. There's a lot of metrics that you can build in Google Analytics, which will provide a lot of value to you. Here's a list of some examples, but I found that that's an underutilized feature by a lot of users and can add a lot of value. And likewise, the last thing we want to talk about in our next session is going to be custom reports. Again, there's a lot you can do with enhanced e-commerce in Google Analytics that they don't provide to you right out of the box. So we'll show you a couple of quick reports that add a lot of value and are going to be really useful to you in terms of surfacing insights that you can set up quickly and kind of check in periodically to expose some of those items. So that's our session here. We did create an infographic summarizing a lot of what I just talked about. It's available as an attachment to this webinar, so feel free to download that from the session. We're also going to publish it on our site after the fact, so feel free to look for it there. I will hang out for a couple of minutes just to take any questions that you may have. But thank you all for attending. I appreciate your attention. I hope that this was useful to you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.